I can't tell you how often I've heard people say they don't like Chardonnay. Now, it's an understandable sentiment on one level. We're all tired of those really oaky and heavily fruity wines. But things are changing. Chardonnay's changing, especially here in Australia. In this episode, we're going to look at the rising star regions of Australian Chardonnay, and whether it be Margaret River, Yarra Valley, or right here in the stunningly beautiful Adelaide Hills, I think you'll find it difficult to say you don't like Chardonnay. So I've just had a great stroll through the vineyards at Petaluma. Now, Petaluma was one of the pioneers in Adelaide Hills, and I'm here with winemaker Peter Dredge, and he's going to give us the goods on why Chardonnay tastes the way it does up here in the hills. Why is it so good here for Chardonnay up in the Adelaide Hills? How does that cool climate contribute to the character?
Well, cool climate is integral in retaining natural acidity, and as you saw in the vineyard out here, we do manipulate the angle of the sun, so it is very cool. In cool areas, it takes a longer time for the vines to ripen and the grapes to reach full flavour maturity, but we do have aspects which give us enough sun to get that ripeness, but also retains a high level of natural acidity. And this is integral in a fresh, vibrant Chardonnay style with long length and complexity all the way to the bottle.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's what I like so much about Adelaide Hills Chardonnay, is that lovely sort of backbone of acidity. But do you think there's a specific flavour that Adelaide Hills is imparting? Or I guess with all these different aspects, it must be difficult to sort of pinpoint a certain flavour. But is there something that you think is specific to Adelaide Hills?
We source our Chardonnay just from the Piccadilly Valley. It's the coolest valley within the Adelaide Hills. And over the years, a lot of people have said they've seen a lot of white peach, so stone fruits, nectarine, these sort of fruits. But on the whiter side, the high natural acidity side. Very fresh, very long on the palate.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's such a stunningly beautiful area. And I can see as we go through the vineyard here, you've got all these little pockets, these individual vineyard sites. And one thing that I've always found fascinating about the great vineyards of the world, all those different sites quite often impart a certain flavour. You know, the French refer to as terroir. Is there a specific terroir in these vineyards here that you particularly like?
We do think Piccadilly is particularly unique. We source from around 7 distinguished vineyards. So by vineyard, I mean you can look at the rolling hills just here. So this will be a parcel which we will produce separately. Just over the back of a hill here is another parcel we will produce separately. And we have very different soil profiles through here in the Adelaide Hills. It's an ancient upsurge. We have a huge variety of soil types, and also in undulation as far as gullies and natural altitude as well. So you start to build a complexity. What we do is we vinify each block separately, and then we have a look at these aspects and see what's strong to those particular parcels. And then at the end, what we can do is get out our palettes and paint a picture of what we think is the best blend within that Chardonnay.
Yeah, that's always fascinating to me, because people view the word blending as something inherently negative, but what you're doing is taking the bits and pieces from each of these parcels you like best, that you think, you know, the sum of the parts is better than the individual sort of expression.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's one varietal. It's from Piccadilly as well, but there's there's subtle nuances which differ within different aspects and throughout this whole valley. And what we try and do is, we're fascinated by it. We take it to a very small level, but in the end, it gives us more options at the end to try and hone in on that perfect Chardonnay.
So we were talking about aspect a little bit earlier, and I think this is a perfect vineyard to look at that because of the way it's contoured and shaped. And how does that sort of aspect affect the actual flavours in this bottled wine? Because you said the backbone of this particular wine we're about to taste pretty much comes from this block here.
It does. We are right in the heart of the Petaluma Chardonnay here. If this was a flat piece of land in this cool climate, we wouldn't ripen these grapes. These are facing north, and you can just see now they're very exposed to the sun as it starts to set in the west. So if you have a look here, we're getting cool climate fruit, but also plenty of sun exposure, plenty of sun for the leaves, and that's what makes a balanced wine. Good fruit expression, high acidity.
So when you say cool climate fruit, you mean slightly smaller berries? Is that the idea in cool climate? Is that what happens, or what do you mean by that?
So here we do have small berries, but this is for very concentrated flavour. It's all hand tended, this vineyard, so hand pruned, hand picked, etc. We do various things in the vineyard to try and maximise quality.
Let's put it to the test. Enough discussion, it's time for a glass.
It's 2009 just here, not quite ready, but here's one I prepared earlier.
Ideal. Yeah, it's got that lovely nose you talked about, that sort of nectarine thing. I can really kind of get that. Yeah, that's fantastic. So that may be a nice sort of little flavour profile to take forward, is a nectarine kind of character.
Absolutely. See that? You see that lovely melon fruit, very rich, complex, but that long acid on the palate.
Well, not sure I wasn't a convert before I got here, but I certainly am now. Here's to Adelaide Hills Chardonnay. Cheers, mate. I'm often asked about how long to age wines for, and it can be a tricky subject. So, do all wines age well? No, in fact, many wines made nowadays, both red and white, are in fact made in a style that's meant to be drunk young. But when it does come to wines with age-worthiness, what you're looking for are three major components. Tannin, now that's something you find in red wines that give you that sort of mouth-drying sensation, if you like. Acidity is another component, that's the mouth-watering sort of juicy sensation you get. And concentration of fruit and flavour. And when it comes to red wines, the better versions, the most age-worthy versions if you like, simply have high concentrations of those components. White wine's a little bit tricky in the sense that there's no tannin in white wine, or very little, and so the best ones age on the strength of acidity, concentration of fruit, and sometimes a little bit of sweetness. So here's my advice. Better to drink a wine a little bit too young and recognise its potential than to torture it in the wine cellar till it's lost all its life and vivacity. So err on the side of youth rather than age. Sort of funny, it made me think about when you talked about oak just a moment ago. Obviously, over-oaked Chardonnays of the past, it's an understandable sentiment, but nowadays it seems like oak is just part of the background noise, if you like, rather than a dominant feature, and that's without a doubt the characteristic in this.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Some time ago there was very much a movement that we were over Chardonnay. What's the next trend we're looking for? And I think most of those people were very wrong. You know, quality Chardonnay from the right regions is still, for me, the most exciting white wine on the planet. And we're starting to see a resurgence of these sorts of wines.
So what is it about the region here that makes it good for growing Chardonnay?
Well, I think like a lot of the up-and-coming regions for really high-end Chardonnay, Adelaide Hills is a cool climate. It shares that with regions like Margaret River, Yarra Valley, Mornington Peninsula, and they tend to produce wines that have more elegance, finesse, ability to age than perhaps some of the warmer regions.
And so the warmer regions typically going to give you big, full-blown, rich flavours, a little more restrained flavours from cool climate.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
In terms of Adelaide Hills, is there a particular flavour that you think is consistent in the region, or is it just maybe something you're doing that you think is typical and what you look for?
Well, I think we tend to find that the flavours in ripe Chardonnay are more in the nutty, hazelnutty, mealy spectrum, and some of those stone fruits, nectarines, rather than the riper melony characters you might get from other regions. The M3 style that we've been developing since 2000 is a bit unique within the hills, and I think it's a style that we're developing to try and have a wine that has the ability to age well as be approachable, relatively young.
Well, this is delicious. I think one of the first things as I taste this one, there's this fantastic, juicy, citrusy quality, and relatively good acidity is going to be derived from a cooler climate area. Is that right?
Yeah, acidity is great in these wines. Very rarely do we have to add acid. You get lovely natural balance, and I think in terms of a complete wine, length of flavour, balance, that's really important.
What I would often refer to as slightly sneaky wine, and by that I mean you taste it and you go, wow, that's really good, and then sort of 20 seconds later you go, oh, hang on a second, that's really good. There's all these wonderful complex flavours that start emerging out of it, and that to me is always the mark of a great wine, that evolving sort of character.
Yeah, we like to talk about layers of flavour, and I think that you get initially the fruit flavours, then you get the barrel ferment flavours, and persistence is really important, and one of my great mentors, Len Evans, used to talk regularly about length of flavour, persistence of flavour, and the ability of a wine to change in the mouth.
Absolutely.
You get those initial fruit flavours, and then you swallow it and the flavour changes and stays with you for minutes afterwards.
Well, cheers to the brilliance of cool climate Adelaide Hills Chardonnay.
Thank you.
The Cullen family were pioneers in the Margaret River region, and daughter Vanya is carrying on the family tradition. So here to discuss Chardonnay. Why Chardonnay? Why Margaret River? Why is it such a special place for this grape?
Margaret River is a Mediterranean maritime climate, and Chardonnay grows. I mean, Chardonnay grows well everywhere, but I think the old soils and the low yields that we get inherently give good quality.
Came at a good time. You've just literally put this year's harvest into barrel.
Yeah, it is really fresh, and it's looking like, I think, the best Chardonnay we've ever made. So we're really
you mentioned
happy.
that earlier. Now, you're thinking the biodynamics has something to do with that, and I know you're definitely a proponent of biodynamic farming.
Yeah, we've been biodynamic in the vineyard since 2004, and that is about having healthy soils and plants and actual balance. It's a holistic way of making wine. I mean, you don't want to put the wine under pressure at all, but we're very pleased with the fruit quality we've had, yeah.
So what we've got here is crushed Chardonnay fruit, the juice being put in the barrel, period. Nothing added.
Yeah, it's a challenge for a winemaker trained in science to allow the land to express itself actually in the bottle. We harvest the fruit by hand, squeeze the juice out of the whole bunches, then rack that into barrel and let it ferment. I mean, it is sort of in a way you could say it's an old-fashioned way to make wine, but you can't make wine like that unless you've got the balance in the vineyard, and that's the trick, is to allow the the great site to produce the wine. Since we've been biodynamic, we've noticed an improvement in quality across the board with all our wines.
Could you describe that to someone? You're saying that there's better quality in the wines, but is there a discernible flavour difference to, say, this Chardonnay and, say, maybe 5 years ago before you started the practices?
Yeah, I think, not anything like yeast and acidity means that you have a wine that is in balance. It's when you harvest it, it's physiologically ripe. It has a good acid and flavour and sugar balance, and that comes through in the wine. You don't have to add anything to get that balance, and we're very lucky with that.
Chardonnay likes the flavour of oak and it works, but it's really a question of timing, isn't it, or quality of oak, or what's your impression, or at least your philosophy with oak use?
Well, we want the fruit to express itself, so the oak is really a salt and pepper, if anything, and we've pulled right back on our oak with our Chardonnays.
Okay, let's put the pear juice to the test then.
Biodynamic pear juice.
Biodynamic pear juice. And you're thinking this may be one of the best you've made at this point?
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
I mean, we don't like to preempt anything, but there we go.
Oh, fantastic.
So this was whole bunch pressed and then put into barrel.
God, it's fantastic. It's really, really...
It's very hard to look at wines when they're this young and sort of say
Yeah, of course, they're still
anything.
fermenting and... Yeah.
But it's, if you see the story from the grapes through to the wine now as it is, and then you can sort of understand where it's going to go to, but it's very elegant and very fine.
Fantastic acid structure in there. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, that's very impressive, very exuberant and really, really fine at the same time. That's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
I'm here in the cellars of Ewing Station with winemaker Willie Lunn. We're going to talk about oak. Now, why are we going to talk about oak? Because it would appear that that's the issue that people have. Historically, too much oak, which can sort of, dull the wine down. But Willie, tell me a bit about what you've got going on here. You've got all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Tell me what you're doing with the oak here.
Okay, Mark. We use a number of different barrel sizes. We've got these 500 litre pungeons. We've got 225 litre barriques. And so for our feeling for Yarra Valley, it's cool climate Chardonnay, doesn't lend itself to massive oak. And so by using these bigger barrels, you're getting some maturation, but you're not getting the full impact of, say, a smaller barrique. But we'll use a number of different forests, a number of different char levels, and the whole idea for us is just to get some window dressing on that Chardonnay. We don't want it to be the dominant feature, we want it to be sort of background.
And right here we've got a bottle of your 05 Chardonnay.
So this is our reserve Chardonnay, which comes from the upper Yarra, a little bit from the middle Yarra, and then a little bit from the bottom of the valley floor here.
And I guess if you've got more delicate fruit from a cool climate like Yarra, you don't want too much oak.
Not at all. In great Chardonnay, you want middle palate richness, and that comes from fruit, doesn't come from oak. And so what we want to do is look at the richness of the palate, and then we want to balance that with the oak that we're going to use. Right. So it might be a medium toast from, say, Vosges, which is a very spicy sort of forest. And then we'll use some heavier toast maybe for the valley floor where it can handle more oak. But the idea is just to have it as background and play into the wine, not dominate it.
What is it that, in a sort of a tight nutshell, is the characteristics of Yarra Valley Chardonnay?
Well, Yarra Valley Chardonnay, it's cool climate, so we want white peach or stone fruit. We want some spice, cinnamon, clove spice, which we're getting from the oak impact. But also you just want finesse. So you want what I call middle palate richness going to this mineral length. And that's, I think, are the hallmarks of Yarra Valley Chardonnay.
Well, what's cool about that is everything you just said, I'm getting as I'm smelling it here. And it's not even power suggestion, I'm getting all those characteristics. That's a beautifully balanced, absolutely bloody delicious glass of Chardonnay. Well done, mate. Fantastic.
Excellent, thank you.
So Willie, obviously cool climate's a contributing factor to the style of the wines in the Yarra, but is it just climate simply, or is there other factors?
The way I see it in the Yarra Valley, we have three really distinct regions, primarily based on elevation, but also soil. We have the Upper Yarra, which is 500 metres, sort of red soils. We have middle of the valley, which is sort of the cold stream region, which is about 350 metres. And then we have the valley floor, which is where we are here. Yarra Glen is about 150 metres.
And how does that elevation impact the flavour of the grapes? Obviously there must be some sort of development that happens there.
What we'll see out of the Upper Yarra is we'll see sort of these white fruit, stone fruit, peach, nectarine. Then in the middle of the valley, we're getting the 350 metres, we're getting sort of the melon. And then down on the valley floor here, we get more straw and palate weight.
Now Chardonnay, obviously the focus is Chardonnay here at Ewing Station, but there's other things you do, there's other varieties that do well in the valley.
Yeah, well, one of the other varieties that we're well known for is Pinot Noir, and again we get that from the Upper Yarra, which is sort of those red cherry, red fruit, and then blueberry, black fruit in the lower Yarra. Other things are Shiraz is doing Shiraz Viognier, which we do here at Yarring, has become very important.
Great style too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know about you, but my love for Chardonnay has been rekindled. Sure, it probably deserved the bad rap with some pretty oaky and clumsy numbers for a while there, but the reality is that modern Australian Chardonnay is on fire. So think cool climate, think balance, but most of all, think twice before you say, I don't like Chardonnay. Now excuse me while I think seafood.